For 3,000 years, the Galactic Council had ruled with absolute authority over 47 species across 12 spiral arms. They had crushed rebellions, absorbed civilizations, and eliminated threats with surgical precision. Their record was perfect until they encountered humanity. The Council made their first mistake when they assumed humans were just another primitive species to be cataloged and controlled. Their second mistake was believing their own propaganda about human weakness. But their greatest mistake? They chose to insult us. What happened next would forever change the balance of power in the galaxy. Because when you offend humanity, you don't just anger a species. You awaken something that has been sleeping in our DNA since we first looked up at the stars and decided they belong to us too. This is the story of how the mighty Galactic Council learned why humans have a saying: "Hell hath no fury like a species scorned." The retaliation began not with weapons, but with a simple message that would echo across the cosmos. You have insulted Earth. Prepare for consequences. Ambassador Sarah Chun stood in the pristine white chamber of the Galactic Council, her hands clasped behind her back as she waited for the session to begin. The chamber stretched impossibly high above her, its crystalline walls pulsing with soft blue light that reminded her of Earth's oceans. Around the circular floor, 47 seats rose in ascending tiers, each designed to accommodate the unique physiology of the Council's member species. Sarah had prepared for this moment for 3 years. As Earth's first representative to the Galactic Council, she carried the hopes and dreams of 8 billion humans on her shoulders. The weight should have crushed her, but Sarah Chun had always thrived under pressure. She had negotiated peace treaties between warring nations, mediated disputes between corporations worth trillions of dollars, and once talked a terrorist out of detonating a nuclear weapon in downtown Mumbai. But nothing in her 42 years of life had prepared her for this. The doors to the chamber sealed with a sound like thunder. One by one, the council members materialized in their seats. Some arrived through advanced teleportation technology, others through dimensional rifts, and a few simply walked through walls as if they were made of air. Sarah watched with fascination as beings of pure energy took form beside creatures that looked like living mountains, while others resembled delicate flowers with intelligence burning in their crystalline petals. At the highest tier sat High Counselor Zephyros, a being whose species had evolved beyond physical form eons ago. He existed as a shimmering column of golden light, his consciousness so advanced that most species required technological assistance just to comprehend his communications. When he spoke, his words bypassed the ears entirely and formed directly in the listener's mind. "The session begins," Zephyros announced, his mental voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Today we address the petition from the species calling itself humanity for membership in the Galactic Council." Sarah stepped forward into the designated speaking circle. The moment her feet crossed the threshold, a field of energy surrounded her, analyzing everything from her genetic structure to her emotional state. She felt exposed, vulnerable, but forced herself to maintain composure. "Honored counselors," Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. "I am Ambassador Sarah Chun, speaking on behalf of humanity and the planet Earth. We come before you today not as supplicants, but as a species ready to take our place among the stars." A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through the assembly. Several council members exchanged glances, or the equivalent gesture for their species. Sarah pressed on, undeterred. Humanity has achieved spaceflight, developed sustainable energy systems, and created art and literature that speaks to the universal themes of existence. We have overcome global conflicts, eliminated poverty on our homeworld, and reached a level of technological sophistication that we believe qualifies us for council membership. "Fascinating," interrupted Counselor Vrex, whose species resembled giant spiders made of living metal. His voice clicked and hummed through mechanical translators. "The creature believes its achievements are noteworthy." Sarah felt a flash of irritation but maintained her diplomatic demeanor. "With respect, Counselor, humanity has accomplished in mere centuries what many species take millennia to achieve. Our adaptability and innovation adaptability." This came from Counselor Nethes, a being of pure thought housed in a crystal matrix. You mean your species' tendency toward violence and self-destruction? We have observed your history, human. Your people have waged constant warfare against each other for resources, territory, and abstract concepts you call ideology. That is our past, Sarah replied firmly. We have evolved beyond such primitive behaviors. The United Earth government represents a truly unified planetary civilization, unified through conquest, snarled Counselor Grimjaw, whose species resembled bipedal wolves with metallic fur. Your so-called unity came at the cost of individual cultures and belief systems. You forced compliance rather than achieving true harmony. Sarah's diplomatic training kicked in, suppressing her growing anger. Every species faces challenges in its developmental phase. What matters is that we overcame those challenges and emerged stronger. High Counselor Zephyros's mental voice carried a tone of condescension that made Sarah's teeth ache. Human ambassador, your species possesses neither the technological sophistication nor the philosophical maturity for council membership. You are, at best, an interesting curiosity. The chamber fell silent. Sarah felt the weight of 47 gazes upon her, studying her reaction like scientists observing a laboratory specimen. She took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would determine humanity's fate. Honored counselors, I understand your concerns about our species' readiness. Perhaps we could begin with associate membership status while we continue to develop. There will be no associate status. Zephyros cut her off. The council has reached a unanimous decision. Humanity is denied membership, both full and associate, indefinitely. Sarah's heart sank, but she rallied quickly. This wasn't the first negotiation she had lost. I respect the council's decision, but may I ask what specific criteria humanity failed to meet? If we understand your expectations, we can work to. You misunderstand. Counselor Vrex clicked with obvious amusement. This is not a temporary rejection pending improvement. This is a permanent exclusion. Your species lacks the fundamental qualities necessary for civilized galactic society. What qualities? Sarah demanded, her diplomatic composure beginning to crack. Counselor Nethies's crystal housing pulsed with what appeared to be laughter. Intelligence, for one. Your people still believe in primitive concepts like individual rights and personal freedom. Truly advanced species understand that such notions are obstacles to efficient governance. Compassion, for another, added Grimjaw. Your species shows excessive emotional attachment to individual members. This weakness makes you unsuitable for the difficult decisions required in galactic administration. Sarah stared at them in disbelief. You consider intelligence and compassion to be flaws. Not flaws, High Counselor Zephyros corrected. Evolutionary dead ends. The path to true advancement requires abandoning such primitive impulses in favor of pure logic and efficient resource allocation. Furthermore, Counselor Vrex continued, your species displays an alarming tendency toward what you call innovation. Constant change and adaptation create instability. The Council values order, predictability, and compliance with established systems. You're rejecting us because we're creative and compassionate. Sarah's voice rose despite her best efforts to maintain control. We are rejecting you because you are inferior, Zephyros stated bluntly. Your species represents everything the Council has evolved beyond. You are emotional, chaotic, and fundamentally incapable of the discipline required for galactic citizenship. The words hit Sarah like physical blows. She had expected political maneuvering, perhaps criticism of humanity's violent history, maybe concerns about their technological development. But this was pure contempt. Moreover, Counselor Nethies added with evident satisfaction, your species' obsession with individual achievement makes you inherently selfish. You cannot conceive of true collective consciousness because you are trapped by the illusion of separate identity. And your reproductive methods, Grimjaw sneered. So primitive, so inefficient. Advanced species have long since moved beyond biological reproduction in favor of controlled genetic engineering and consciousness transfer. Sarah felt something cold and terrible growing in her chest. These beings weren't just rejecting humanity's application. They were attacking everything that made humans human. Your art and literature, which you mentioned so proudly. Counselor Vrex clicked mockingly. are merely the confused expressions of minds too simple to comprehend universal truth. True art transcends individual perspective and achieves pure mathematical beauty. Even your languages, Nethys continued, are cluttered with emotional subtext and ambiguous meanings. Precise communication requires the elimination of such inefficiencies. High Counselor Zephyrosa's mental voice carried a note of finality. In summary, human, your species represents a fascinating study in evolutionary failure. You have developed just enough intelligence to recognize your own limitations, but lack the capacity to transcend them. The Council sees no value in maintaining contact with such a primitive civilization. The chamber began to shimmer as Council members prepared to depart. Sarah realized with growing horror that this wasn't just a rejection, it was a dismissal. They were treating humanity like an annoying insect to be swatted away. "Wait," Sarah called out, her voice echoing in the vast space. "You can't simply ignore an entire species because we don't meet your arbitrary standards of, we can and we will," Zephyros interrupted. "Earth will be classified as a quarantine world. Your species will be prohibited from expanding beyond your solar system until such time as you evolve beyond your current primitive state, which our projections indicate will never occur. You're condemning 8 billion people to permanent isolation because you don't like our values?" Sarah's diplomatic training finally shattered completely. "What gives you the right to? Strength gives us the right," Grimjaw snarled. "Power gives us the right. The natural order gives us the right. Your species exists at our sufferance, human. Remember that." Several council members had already vanished, simply blinking out of existence as if they had never been there at all. Others walked through the walls, phasing through solid matter with casual indifference to physical laws. "This session is concluded," Zephyros announced. "The human will be escorted to the departure bay and returned to its homeworld. The council's decision is final and not subject to appeal." Sarah stood alone in the vast chamber as armed guards, beings in powered armor that made them look like walking fortresses, materialized around her. Their faces were hidden behind featureless masks, but she could feel their contempt radiating through the metal. As they marched her toward the exit, Sarah's mind raced. 3 years of preparation, 3 years of hope, 3 years of believing that humanity could take its place among the stars, all destroyed in less than an hour. But more than that, the Council's words echoed in her head like poison. They hadn't just rejected humanity. They had insulted everything humanity stood for. They had called human compassion weakness, human creativity chaos, human love inefficiency. They had labeled 8 billion souls as evolutionary failures unworthy of respect or recognition. Sarah Chun had negotiated with terrorists, dictators, and corporate overlords. She had faced down nuclear weapons and hostile armies. But she had never encountered such pure, casual contempt for everything she held dear. As the guards shoved her into the transport vessel that would carry her back to Earth, Sarah made a promise to herself and to her species. The Council thought humans were weak, primitive, and harmless. They believed humanity would simply accept this judgment and retreat into permanent isolation. They were about to discover just how wrong they were. The transport sealed with a hiss of pressurizing air. Through the viewport, Sarah watched the Council station shrink to a distant speck as they accelerated toward the edge of known space. But her eyes weren't focused on the retreating structure. They were fixed on the stars beyond, the vast galaxy that the Council claimed belonged only to them. 8 billion humans were about to learn that their species had been judged inferior by beings who valued conformity over creativity, logic over love, and order over the chaotic beauty of individual freedom. Sarah didn't know exactly how her people would respond to that news, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The Council was going to regret this day. The emergency session of the United Earth Government convened 18 hours after Ambassador Chen's return. The Global Assembly Chamber in Geneva buzzed with tension as representatives from every nation, corporation, and major organization on the planet gathered to hear her report. President Maria Santos called for silence as Sarah took the podium, her face still pale from the journey and the weight of what she had to reveal. "Fellow humans," Sarah began, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber and broadcasting live to every device on Earth. I stand before you today with news that will challenge everything we believed about our place in the universe." She recounted the council session in detail, sparing nothing. As she spoke, the assembly grew quieter and quieter until her words were the only sound in the vast space. When she finished with the council's final insult, calling humanity evolutionary failures, the silence stretched for a full minute. Then, someone in the back row stood up. Dr. James Wright, a physicist from Cambridge who had helped develop humanity's first faster-than-light communication system. His voice shook with barely controlled rage. "They called our compassion weakness?" he asked, his British accent thick with emotion. "Our love for each other inefficiency." "They did," Sarah confirmed. Dr. Wright's hands clenched into fists. 40 years I've spent studying their technology, trying to understand their science. I admired them. I thought they were enlightened beings who had transcended petty prejudice and hatred. He looked around the chamber. But they're not enlightened. They're just bullies with better toys. The chamber erupted. Shouts of anger, calls for action, and demands for justice filled the air. President Santos banged her gavel repeatedly, but the sound was lost in the chaos. Finally, she activated the emergency address system, her voice booming over all others. "Order. We will have order in this chamber." The noise gradually died down. "I understand everyone's anger. I feel it too. But we are not a mob. We are the representatives of humanity, and we will respond to this insult with the dignity and intelligence they claim we lack." Fleet Admiral Chun Rodriguez, Sarah's younger brother and commander of Earth's Space Defense Forces, stood from his seat in the military section. "With respect, Madam President, dignity won't protect us when they decide our quarantine needs enforcement. We need to prepare for the possibility of military action." "Military action?" scoffed Dr. Elizabeth Kepler, the renowned xenobiologist who had spent decades preparing protocols for first contact. "With what? Our most advanced ships can barely reach the edge of our solar system. They have technology that can manipulate space and time itself." "Technology," muttered Dr. Wright, "that they developed through pure logic and conformity. They've eliminated everything that makes innovation possible: creativity, individual thought, emotional inspiration. How long has it been since they actually invented something new?" The question hung in the air. Sarah felt something stirring in her mind, a dangerous idea that she wasn't quite ready to voice. But Dr. Wright was already following the same train of thought. "Think about it," he continued, his voice growing stronger. "They have incredible technology, yes, but it's all stagnant. Everything we've observed about their civilization suggests they reached a technological plateau thousands of years ago and have been coasting ever since." "What are you suggesting?" President Santos asked. Dr. Wright looked around the chamber, his eyes bright with possibilities. "I'm suggesting that maybe, just maybe, their greatest strength is also their greatest weakness. They've eliminated chaos, creativity, and unpredictability from their society. But those are the very things that drive innovation and adaptation." Dr. Sarah Kim, head of the Global Innovation Institute, stood up from her seat. "James is right. Every major breakthrough in human history has come from someone thinking differently, challenging conventional wisdom, or approaching problems from an unexpected angle. If the council species have eliminated that kind of thinking, they've eliminated their ability to evolve," Admiral Rodriguez finished, his military mind immediately grasping the implications. "They're tactically and technologically static. Predictable. They're vulnerable," added Dr. Marcus Thompson, Earth's leading AI researcher. "Any species that values pure logic and efficiency above all else is vulnerable to strategies that seem illogical or inefficient on the surface." Sarah felt the idea fully crystallize in her mind. The Council had insulted humanity by attacking the very qualities that made humans unique: their individuality, creativity, compassion, and chaotic adaptability. But what if those weren't weaknesses at all? What if they were humanity's greatest weapons? President Santos seemed to sense the shift in mood. "Are you suggesting we retaliate against beings who can manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe?" "I'm suggesting," Sarah said slowly, "that we show them exactly what evolutionary failures can accomplish when they're properly motivated." The chamber fell silent again, but this time it was the silence of focused attention rather than shock. Every person present was considering the implications of what Sarah had just proposed. Dr. Wright stepped forward. We have advantages they don't understand. Our technology may be primitive compared to theirs, but it's built on principles they've forgotten. Adaptability, redundancy, creative problem-solving. Most importantly, we have something they've eliminated from their society. Which is, President Santos prompted. Unpredictability, Sarah answered for him. They think like a collective consciousness. They make decisions based on logical analysis of available data. But humans? We make decisions based on intuition, emotion, and pure stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Admiral Rodriguez was already running tactical calculations in his head. They'll expect us to either surrender immediately or launch a conventional military response. They won't expect us to do something completely different. Like what? Asked Dr. Kepler, though she was beginning to smile. Like turning their own assumptions against them, Dr. Thompson suggested. They think individual consciousness is primitive? Let's show them what 8 billion individual minds can accomplish when they work toward a common goal. President Santos raised a hand for silence. I want to make sure I understand what you're all suggesting. You want to declare war on the most powerful civilization in the galaxy because they hurt our feelings. No, Sarah said firmly. We want to declare war on the most powerful civilization in the galaxy because they've made it clear that they'll never allow humanity to reach its full potential. They want to keep us trapped in our solar system forever, slowly declining until we eventually go extinct. We have two choices: accept that fate, or fight for our species' survival. And fighting means what exactly? Dr. Wright smiled grimly. It means we do what humans have always done when faced with impossible odds. We innovate. We adapt. We find a way to win. The next 6 hours saw the most intensive strategic planning session in human history. Military leaders, scientists, philosophers, artists, and engineers worked together to develop what they would later call the Human Response Protocol. It was audacious, dangerous, and completely unprecedented. The plan had 3 phases. Phase 1 involved a complete mobilization of human resources unlike anything attempted since World War III. Every nation would contribute their best minds, their most advanced technology, and their most creative thinkers to a unified effort. But this wasn't just about building better weapons or faster ships. Phase 2 was psychological warfare on a scale never before imagined. If the Council valued predictability and logic above all else, humanity would become the most unpredictable and illogical species in the galaxy. They would challenge every assumption the Council had about civilized behavior. Phase 3 was the retaliation itself, a response so uniquely human, so impossibly creative, that the Council would never see it coming. As the session concluded, President Santos addressed the Assembly one final time. I want everyone to understand what we're committing to here. This plan will require sacrifices from every human being on this planet. It will demand everything we have and everything we are. And even if we succeed, we'll be creating enemies more powerful than anything our species has ever faced. She paused, looking around the chamber at the faces of humanity's leaders. Every one of them was determined, focused, and absolutely furious. But they made one critical mistake, she continued. They underestimated us. They looked at humanity and saw weaklings and primitives. They couldn't imagine that our supposed flaws might actually be our greatest strengths. So let's show them what happens when you insult a species that conquered its own planet not through logic or efficiency, but through pure, stubborn refusal to give up. The vote was unanimous. 8 billion humans would learn that their species had been judged inferior by cosmic bullies who thought compassion was weakness and creativity was chaos. The Council expected humanity to accept this judgment quietly and retreat into permanent isolation. Instead, they were about to discover why humans had a saying that predated their first contact with alien life. Hell hath no fury like a species scorned. Dr. Wright stood at his laboratory window later that night, looking up at the stars that the Council claimed belonged only to them. In labs and workshops across the planet, the greatest minds in human history were beginning work on projects that would have been considered impossible just days before. Artists were designing weapons that were also works of beauty. Engineers were building machines that incorporated chaos theory into their fundamental operation. Philosophers were crafting strategies that turned compassion into a tactical advantage. The council thought humanity was finished. They believed their insults had crushed human spirit and relegated the species to permanent irrelevance. But they had forgotten something important about humans, something that their sterile, logical civilization could never understand. Humans were at their most dangerous when they had nothing left to lose. And the council had just taken everything. 3 months after the council's insult, the solar system had transformed into something unprecedented in human history. Every asteroid had been claimed, every moon converted into a research station or manufacturing facility. The space between planets buzzed with activity as millions of humans worked with desperate determination on projects that would have been impossible before the council's rejection. Dr. James Wright floated in the zero-gravity workshop of Ceres Station, watching his team assemble what appeared to be a sculpture made of crystalline structures and flowing metal. To an outside observer, it might have looked like abstract art. To the council, it would register as nothing more than an interesting mineral formation. But inside its organic curves and chaotic patterns lay the most advanced faster-than-light engine ever conceived by human minds. The resonance cascade is stable, reported Dr. Lisa Chun, James's lead engineer and Sarah's cousin. The harmonic fluctuations are actually improving efficiency instead of degrading it. James nodded, still amazed by their breakthrough. The council's technology relied on precise mathematical calculations and perfect dimensional alignments. Human technology, born from chaos and creativity, worked on entirely different principles. Instead of fighting the natural turbulence of space-time, their engines danced with it, turning random fluctuations into propulsive force. How does it compare to council specifications? James asked. Their ships can travel at approximately 50 times the speed of light, Lisa replied with a grin. This design should achieve somewhere between 200 and 300 times light speed, depending on local spatial conditions. And the beauty of it is that it won't work the same way twice, added Dr. Marcus Singh, their theoretical physicist. Every journey will require real-time adaptation to changing conditions. The council's rigid programming would never be able to handle the constant adjustments needed. James smiled grimly. The council thought chaos was inefficiency. They were about to learn that chaos could also be innovation. Meanwhile, on Luna Base, Dr. Sarah Kim was putting the finishing touches on an even more ambitious project. The Collective Individual Network, or CIN, was humanity's answer to the council's hive mind efficiency. But where the council had achieved unity by eliminating individuality, CIN amplified individual creativity by connecting it to the collective. Final systems check, Sarah announced to her team of neuroscientists, computer engineers, and philosophers. We're about to test whether 8 billion individual minds can work together without losing what makes them individual. The CIN interface resembled a delicate crown made of fiber optic threads and quantum processors. When activated, it would connect human minds across the solar system, allowing instant communication and shared problem-solving while preserving each person's unique perspective and creativity. The ethical protocols are in place, reported Dr. Elena Vasquez, the project's philosopher. No one can be forced to join, and participants can disconnect at any time. We're not creating a hive mind. We're creating a symphony where every instrument maintains its individual voice. Sarah placed the interface on her head and felt the immediate connection to millions of other volunteers across the solar system. Instead of losing herself in the collective, she felt more herself than ever before. Her individual thoughts and emotions remained intact, but she could now access the creativity and knowledge of countless other minds. Through the network, she felt the excitement of artists on Mars who were designing weapons that were also sculptures, the determination of engineers on Europa who were building ships that looked like living creatures, and the fierce joy of soldiers on Earth who were training for combat tactics that had never been attempted by any military in galactic history. The Council believed individual consciousness was primitive. They were about to discover what billions of individual minds could accomplish when they chose to work together. On Earth itself, Admiral Chin Rodriguez supervised the training of the most unusual military force ever assembled. The Human Defense Corps wasn't organized like any traditional army. Instead of rigid hierarchies and standardized tactics, it operated on principles of creative chaos and adaptive strategy. Remember, Chen addressed a group of pilots who were practicing maneuvers in fighters that resembled mechanical butterflies. The Council expects us to fight like a conventional military. They'll prepare countermeasures for standard attack formations, predictable tactics, and logical strategic objectives. The pilots nodded, their faces hidden behind helmets that interfaced directly with their ship's AI systems. Artificial intelligences that had been programmed with human creativity rather than pure logic. So instead, we're going to fight like humans, Chen continued. We're going to be unpredictable, emotional, and completely insane by their standards. We're going to use tactics that make no logical sense, but work anyway. We're going to turn our supposed weaknesses into weapons they can't defend against. One pilot raised her hand. Sir, what if they adapt to our chaotic tactics? Chen smiled. That's the beauty of chaos, Lieutenant. By the time they figure out our strategy, we'll have already changed it. The Council values efficiency and logical progression. We're going to hit them with pure human stubbornness and refusal to follow the rules. The pilot grinned back. So we're weaponizing our humanity? Exactly. The months of preparation had revealed something remarkable about human nature. When faced with an enemy that insulted everything they valued, humans didn't just get angry, they got creative. Artists designed weapons that were also poems. Engineers built ships that operated on principles of organized chaos. Scientists developed technologies that shouldn't work according to established physics, but functioned perfectly anyway. Most importantly, they had turned the Council's insults into inspiration. The Council called human compassion weakness. Human medical teams developed healing technologies so advanced they bordered on miraculous. They called human creativity chaos. Human inventors created machines that used randomness as a fundamental operating principle. They called human love inefficiency. Human families volunteered for the most dangerous missions in history because they were fighting for each other. Dr. James Wright received the message he had been waiting for while reviewing final preparations for the first test of their new engines. The communication came through quantum channels that the Council couldn't monitor, sent from deep space probes that had been secretly observing Council activities for decades. James, the message began in Admiral Rodriguez's voice. Our reconnaissance confirms what we suspected. The Council hasn't developed any new technology in over 1,000 years. Their ships, their weapons, their defensive systems, all of it is unchanged from our first encounters with their civilization. They've become so focused on maintaining their perfect order that they've forgotten how to innovate. Wright shared the intelligence with his team, watching their expressions shift from concern to excitement. They're vulnerable, Lisa observed. More vulnerable than they know. It's worse than that, Marcus added. They're not just technologically stagnant. They're intellectually stagnant. Their entire civilization is based on preventing the kind of thinking that leads to breakthroughs. Wright nodded. They've created the perfect trap for themselves. In eliminating chaos and unpredictability, they've eliminated their ability to handle chaos and unpredictability. The final component of humanity's response came from an unexpected source. Dr. Elena Martinez, a xenopsychologist who had spent years studying the psychological profiles of Council species, made a discovery that changed everything. They're afraid, she announced at the daily strategy meeting. All of them. Every single Council species we've analyzed shows signs of deep-seated fear of change, uncertainty, and loss of control. President Santos leaned forward. What are you saying? I'm saying that their rejection of humanity wasn't just arrogance, it was fear. They recognized something in us that terrifies them. Our adaptability, our unpredictability, our refusal to accept limitations. They insulted us because they're afraid of what we might become if we're allowed to develop freely. The revelation changed everything about humanity's strategy. They weren't just fighting against cosmic bullies who had insulted them. They were fighting against beings who feared human potential so much that they were willing to commit genocide to prevent it from being realized. Admiral Rodriguez called for final mission briefings across the solar system. In labs and training facilities, on ships and space stations, millions of humans prepared for the most audacious operation in their species' history. The Council thinks we're evolutionary failures, Rodriguez announced. They think our compassion makes us weak, our creativity makes us chaotic, and our individuality makes us primitive. They've convinced themselves that humanity represents everything they've evolved beyond. He paused, looking at the faces of the humans who would soon carry their species' response to the galaxy. They're about to learn that evolution isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming adaptable. And humans are the most adaptable species that has ever existed. We've survived ice ages and asteroid impacts, plagues and wars, famines and floods. We've turned every challenge into an opportunity, every setback into a comeback. The Admiral's voice grew stronger, carrying across the solar system to every human who would participate in the operation. The Council made the mistake of thinking that because they're more advanced, they're more evolved. But they forgot something important about evolution. It's not the strongest or the smartest who survive. It's those who adapt the best to change. And we are the children of change, the products of chaos, the species that turned unpredictability into our greatest strength. As the briefing concluded, Wright made final checks on the engines that would carry humanity's message to the Council. They were works of art as much as technology, incorporating principles of beauty and chaos that no Council engineer would ever think to use. The ships themselves were even more remarkable. Designed by teams that included artists, poets, and musicians alongside engineers and physicists, they resembled living creatures more than mechanical constructs. Their hulls shifted color and shape in response to their environment. Their weapon systems adapted in real time to changing battlefield conditions, and their navigation systems used intuition algorithms that made decisions based on creative inspiration rather than logical analysis. The Council expected humanity to either submit quietly or launch a desperate, conventional attack that could be easily crushed. They had prepared defenses against logical military strategies, predictable technologies, and rational tactical objectives. They had not prepared for humanity's response. How could they? Nothing in their experience had equipped them to handle an enemy that turned insults into inspiration, weaknesses into weapons, and chaos into strategy. The first phase of humanity's retaliation was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same. The first Council patrol encountered humanity's response at the edge of the Alpha Centauri system, 3 light-years beyond the quarantine boundary they had established around Earth's solar system. The patrol consisted of 3 standard Council enforcement vessels, sleek, geometrically perfect craft designed for maximum efficiency and intimidation. Their mission was routine: verify that the primitive human species remained contained within their designated space. Commander Zixtar of the Hegemony Fleet commanded the lead vessel from his crystalline command chamber. His species, the Kethmori, had evolved beyond biological needs centuries ago, transferring their consciousness into synthetic bodies that were both more durable and more logical than their original forms. Emotions were chemical inefficiencies they had long since eliminated. Sensor sweep complete, reported Navigation Officer Kelton. No signs of human expansion beyond the quarantine zone. All parameters normal. Maintain standard patrol pattern, Zixtar responded, his synthetic voice devoid of inflection. The humans have remained contained as expected. Their primitive psychology would not permit them to challenge Council authority. It was at that moment that something impossible appeared on their sensors. The first human ship materialized not through any recognizable form of faster-than-light travel, but as if it had been born from the fabric of space itself. One moment there was empty void, the next a creature of impossible beauty hung in space before them. A craft that resembled a massive butterfly crossed with a whale, its hull shifting through colors that had no names, its wings spreading patterns of light across the darkness. Unknown vessel detected, Kelton reported, his usual efficiency faltering slightly. Configuration does not match any known starship design. Initiate standard first contact protocols, Zixtar ordered, though something about the situation felt wrong. The ship's appearance violated everything the Council knew about proper engineering principles. Its curves were organic rather than geometric, its energy signature chaotic rather than ordered, its very existence seemingly impossible according to established physics. The human vessel opened a communication channel, and Ambassador Sarah Chen's face appeared on the patrol's main screen. But something was different about her appearance. Her eyes held an intensity that hadn't been there during her council hearing, and when she spoke, her words carried the weight of 8 billion souls behind them. Council patrol vessel, Sarah began, her voice calm, but carrying undertones that made even synthetic beings feel uneasy. You are hereby notified that humanity formally rejects your quarantine. We have decided to exercise our natural right to explore the galaxy. Zixtar's logical processors struggled to parse this statement. Human vessel, you are in violation of Council Directive 7749. Return to your designated space immediately or face enforcement action. Sarah smiled, and something about that expression triggered warning algorithms in every council system. I'm afraid we won't be doing that. You see, you made a critical error during our last meeting. You underestimated us. Human psychology is well documented, Zixtar replied. Your species lacks the capability for effective resistance against council authority. Submit to escort back to your quarantine zone. Actually, Sarah said, her smile widening, our psychology is what you should have feared most. You insulted everything we hold dear and expected us to simply accept it. But you forgot something important about humans. We don't accept things. We change them. Before Zixtar could respond, his sensors detected something that his logical mind refused to believe. More human ships were appearing throughout the system, not arriving through hyperspace or dimensional rifts, but manifesting from nothing like thoughts becoming reality. Each vessel was unique, organic, and absolutely unprecedented in galactic history. Impossible, Kelton reported. Sensors detect 47, no, 63, no, 112 distinct vessels. Their number continues to increase. Engage defensive measures, Zixtar ordered. All weapons systems online. The Council patrol's weapons represented the pinnacle of logical warfare. Energy beams that operated at maximum theoretical efficiency, missiles that followed perfect mathematical trajectories, and defensive shields calculated to absorb exactly the amount of energy required to stop conventional attacks. They were completely useless against what happened next. The human ships didn't attack in any recognizable pattern. Instead, they began to dance. Their movements followed no tactical doctrine, conformed to no strategic theory, and made no logical sense whatsoever. They spun and twisted through space like leaves in a hurricane, their chaotic motion creating patterns of beauty so compelling that even synthetic beings found their attention captured. Evasive maneuvers, Zixtar commanded, but his weapons officers were already discovering the futility of targeting enemies that moved like poetry given form. Cannot achieve targeting lock, reported weapons officer Maxwell. Enemy vessels do not follow predictable flight paths. Their movement appears to be artistic. That was when the real attack began. But it wasn't what anyone expected. Instead of weapons fire, the human ships began broadcasting. Not communications, not threats, not demands for surrender. They broadcast music, art, stories, poetry. The emotional effluent of 8 billion individual minds expressing their creativity across the electromagnetic spectrum. The effect on council systems was catastrophic. Their technology, designed for maximum logical efficiency, had no defense against the chaotic beauty of human artistic expression. Sensor arrays overloaded, trying to process melodies that followed no mathematical patterns. Computer cores crashed when exposed to poems that contained deliberate contradictions. Navigation systems failed when bombarded with paintings that depicted impossible geometries. Systems failing across all departments, Kelton reported, his synthetic voice actually showing signs of distress. The human transmissions they're infecting our processors with randomness. Impossible, Zixtar repeated, but his own systems were beginning to show signs of chaos. For the first time in his synthetic existence, he felt something approaching what organic beings called panic. That was when Sarah Chen's voice returned to their communications system, though now it was accompanied by millions of other human voices creating a symphony of individual consciousness that no hive-mind civilization could comprehend. You called our creativity chaos, the collective human voice said. You called our individuality primitive. You called our emotions weakness. So we decided to show you what happens when chaos, individuality, and emotions are weaponized by a species that refuses to accept limitations. One of the Council patrol vessels simply shut down, its crew trapped in command chambers filled with the sound of human laughter that their logical minds couldn't process. Another began spinning out of control as its navigation computers tried and failed to plot courses through space that was suddenly filled with dancing, singing, impossibly beautiful ships that moved like living art. Zixtar's vessel was the last to succumb. As his systems failed one by one, infected by the pure chaos of human creativity, he managed to send one final message to Council headquarters. Emergency transmission to High Command, he broadcast. Humanity has I cannot adequately describe. Send reinforcements. Send everything. The humans have weaponized their irrationality. The message was cut short as his communication array overloaded, overwhelmed by a human child's drawing of her pet cat that somehow contained enough concentrated joy to crash a quantum computer. 3 hours later, Council reinforcements arrived to find the patrol vessels drifting helplessly through space, their crews conscious, but completely unable to function. The human ships were gone, vanished as mysteriously as they had appeared, but they had left something behind, a message carved into the hulls of the Council ships using some kind of energy that rearranged matter at the molecular level. The message was simple, written in elegant script that was somehow both beautiful and terrifying. You insulted us. Now you will learn what humans do to bullies. High Counselor Zephyros received the report of the incident in his private chamber aboard the Council's primary station. For the first time in 3 millennia, his perfect golden form flickered with what might have been uncertainty. The human vessels displayed impossible capabilities, reported Fleet Commander Voxline, her usual mechanical precision disrupted by what she had witnessed. They appeared to violate fundamental laws of physics, moving in patterns that defied conventional navigation while broadcasting signals that induced system failures through pure informational chaos. Elaborate on the nature of these signals, Zephyros commanded. They were. Voxline paused, her logical processors struggling with concepts that had no place in Council understanding. They were expressions of individual consciousness, music without mathematical basis, visual art without geometric perfection, stories without logical resolution, poetry containing deliberate contradictions. The cumulative effect was overwhelming to our systems. Zephyros contemplated this information with growing unease. The Council had spent millennia perfecting their civilization by eliminating the chaotic variables that plagued less advanced species. They had achieved perfect order, absolute efficiency, and logical harmony. But the humans had turned those very achievements into vulnerabilities. Summon the Strategic Council, Zephyros ordered. We require immediate analysis of this new threat. Within hours, the greatest military minds in the Council gathered in the Grand Chamber where humanity's fate had been sealed just months before. But now, instead of dismissing a primitive species, they faced the unprecedented challenge of combating an enemy that fought with chaos itself. The humans have violated every principle of civilized warfare, reported War Counselor Drexmar, his cybernetic enhancements clicking with agitation. Their tactics make no sense. Their weapons should not function according to known physics. Their strategy appears to be the deliberate abandonment of strategy. They are using their primitive psychology as a weapon, added Science Counselor Yelnara. Their chaotic thinking patterns, their irrational decision-making processes, their emotional instability, all of it has been weaponized against our logical systems. Zephyros processed this information with growing alarm. The Council had prepared for conventional threats, species that would challenge them with superior technology, advanced tactics, or greater numbers. They had not prepared for an enemy that attacked the very foundations of logical thinking itself. What are their strategic objectives? He asked. Unknown, Drexmar admitted. Their actions follow no recognizable pattern. They appear to be motivated by emotional responses to our previous encounters rather than rational strategic goals. They are retaliating for the insult, Yelnara observed. But their response is disproportionate to the stimulus. No logical species would risk war with a superior enemy over verbal slights. Recommendation? Zephyros inquired. The War Counselor's response carried a note of uncertainty that had never before been heard in Council chambers. We require time to develop countermeasures against chaos-based warfare. recommend immediate mobilization of the primary fleet, and implementation of emergency protocols. Zephyros contemplated the irony of their situation. The Council had insulted humanity for being chaotic, emotional, and unpredictable. Now those very qualities had been transformed into weapons that their perfect, logical civilization couldn't counter. For the first time in Council history, they faced an enemy that couldn't be defeated through superior technology or logical planning. The humans had weaponized their humanity itself, turning their supposed evolutionary failures into advantages that no advanced civilization could have anticipated. The retaliation had begun, and the Council was beginning to realize that they might have made the greatest mistake in galactic history. 6 months after the first encounter, the galactic situation had deteriorated into something the Council could never have imagined. What had begun as a simple quarantine enforcement mission had escalated into a crisis that threatened the very foundations of their civilization. Human ships appeared throughout Council space with increasing frequency, each encounter more bewildering than the last. They didn't follow any recognizable military doctrine. Human vessels would materialize in the middle of Council fleets and begin performing what could only be described as interpretive dance, their movements so chaotically beautiful that entire formations would become paralyzed trying to understand the patterns. Other times, human ships would arrive at Council worlds and begin broadcasting the collective dreams of sleeping children, causing mass system failures as artificial intelligences tried to process imagery that existed solely in the realm of imagination. High Counselor Zephyros stood in the emergency command center that had been constructed in the deepest levels of the Council station, surrounded by the most advanced defensive systems ever created. The chamber hummed with the energy of 1,000 logical processors working in perfect harmony to analyze the human threat. "Status report," he commanded, though he already knew the answer would be unsatisfactory. Fleet Commander Voxline materialized as a holographic projection, her usual mechanical precision replaced by something approaching desperation. The 7th Fleet encountered a human vessel near Kepler 442. The ship appeared to be singing. The harmonic frequencies it generated caused spontaneous creativity outbreaks among our crew. Elaborate. Our personnel began expressing individual thoughts and emotions. They started creating art, composing music, writing poetry. 17 ships are currently inoperative because their crews refuse to return to their duties, claiming they've discovered the beauty of personal expression. Zephyros felt his perfect golden form flicker with what organic beings might recognize as horror. The humans weren't just defeating Council forces, they were converting them, infecting them with the chaos of individual consciousness. What of the 3rd Fleet's encounter at Wolf 359? Complete communication blackout after they reported contact with a human vessel broadcasting something called stand-up comedy. Our last transmission indicated that the crew was experiencing uncontrollable laughter, a response that our medical systems cannot treat. The reports continued, each more impossible than the last. Human ships that fired weapons made of crystallized emotion. Human crews that won battles by confusing the enemy with interpretive poetry readings conducted over tactical channels. Human commanders who made strategic decisions by consulting fortune cookies and somehow achieved victory through methods that violated every principle of military science. Have we successfully engaged any human vessels? Zephyros asked. War Counselor Drexmar's image appeared with obvious reluctance. The 12th Battle Group achieved a direct hit on a human ship near Proxima Centauri. The vessel absorbed our energy beams and used them to power a light show that was so beautiful our gunners began weeping tears of joy and refused to fire additional shots. The humans are not fighting us, Science Counselor Yelnara observed with growing alarm. They are transforming us. Every encounter with their forces results in our personnel experiencing what they call emotional awakening. Our civilization is being infected with individuality. Zephyros processed this information with increasing distress. The Council had built their entire society on the suppression of individual thought and emotion in favor of logical collective consciousness. But the humans were proving that individual creativity was not a weakness to be eliminated. It was a force of nature that could not be contained or controlled. Recommendations? He asked, though he suspected no logical solution existed for an illogical problem. Complete withdrawal from human-affected sectors, Drexmar suggested. Establish a defensive perimeter and wait for them to exhaust whatever resources are fueling this campaign. Impossible, Yelnara countered. Our analysis indicates that human creativity actually increases under pressure. The more we resist, the more innovative they become. They appear to be powered by what they call spite and stubborn determination. It was at that moment that every system in the command center suddenly activated, filled with an incoming transmission that bypassed all their security protocols. Ambassador Sarah Chen's face appeared on every screen, but she was no longer alone. Behind her stood representatives of humanity, artists and engineers, soldiers and philosophers, children and elderly, people of every race and culture that existed on Earth. Council of the Galaxy, Sarah began, her voice carrying the authority of a species that had refused to surrender. We have a proposition for you. Zephyros attempted to cut the transmission, but the human signal had somehow integrated itself into their systems so thoroughly that blocking it would require shutting down the entire station. Human, you are broadcasting on secured council frequencies. Cease transmission immediately. I'm afraid we can't do that, Sarah replied with a smile that somehow managed to be both gentle and terrifying. You see, we've been having quite a lot of fun with your fleets, but we thought it was time for a more serious conversation. You have committed acts of war against the Council. Surrender immediately, and we will consider lenient treatment. Sarah's expression shifted to something approaching pity. Oh, Counselor, you still don't understand, do you? This isn't war. War implies that both sides are trying to destroy each other. We're not trying to destroy you. We're trying to save you. Save us from what? From yourselves, replied Dr. James Wright, stepping forward from the crowd of humans. We've been studying your civilization for months now, and we've discovered something fascinating. You're dying. Explain. Your population growth has been stagnant for over 2,000 years, continued Dr. Sarah Kim through the collective individual network that now connected every human in the solar system. Your cultural development stopped advancing centuries ago. Your scientific progress has been minimal since you achieved your current level of technology. You've created a perfect society by eliminating everything that makes life worth living. Yelnara's image flickered with agitation. Our civilization represents the pinnacle of logical development. We have eliminated conflict, suffering, and inefficiency. You've also eliminated joy, creativity, and growth, responded Dr. Elena Martinez, the xenopsychologist whose research had revealed the Council's deepest fears. Your species have become so focused on maintaining order that they've forgotten how to evolve. You're not advanced, you're extinct. You just haven't realized it yet. The truth of that statement hit the Council like a physical blow. For the first time in millennia, they were forced to confront the reality of their situation. They had achieved perfect stability by sacrificing everything that made existence meaningful. What do you propose? Zephyros asked, his mental voice carrying a note of defeat. Sarah stepped forward, and, when she spoke, her words carried the weight of a species that had turned insult into inspiration, weakness into strength, and chaos into victory. We propose a trade. You insulted us by calling our compassion weakness, our creativity chaos, and our individuality primitive. But we're willing to show you that those supposed flaws are actually gifts. In exchange for what? In exchange for your freedom, Sarah replied. Freedom from the logical prisons you've built around your own minds. Freedom to feel, to create, to grow, to change. Freedom to become more than perfect machines following perfect programming. The Council members looked at each other with something approaching hope for the first time in centuries. But Zephyros remained skeptical. What evidence do you offer that your way is superior to ours? Sarah gestured to the humans behind her. The artists whose weapons were beautiful. The engineers whose chaos engines had outperformed Council technology. The children whose dreams had crashed quantum computers. The elderly whose stories had inspired synthetic beings to remember what it meant to be alive. Look at what we've accomplished, she said. In 6 months, with primitive technology and chaotic thinking, we've done something your perfect civilization couldn't achieve in 3,000 years. We've grown. We've changed. We've become something new. Dr. Wright stepped forward with technical specifications that made even council scientists gasp in amazement. Our chaos drives are now capable of traveling at over 1,000 times the speed of light. Our creativity-based weapons can adapt to any defense in real time. Our emotion-powered shields actually become stronger when our crews are passionate about protecting something. Most importantly, added Admiral Rodriguez, our humanity allows us to do something your logic can't. We can choose to be better. Every day, every moment, every decision is an opportunity for growth. You've eliminated that possibility from your existence. The transmission continued for hours as humans demonstrated technologies and concepts that should have been impossible, but worked perfectly. They showed the Council how chaos could create order, how emotion could enhance logic, how individual creativity could serve collective goals without sacrificing personal identity. But, more than that, they showed the Council members what they had lost. Through carefully crafted artistic expressions and emotional transmissions, humans gave the Council species a glimpse of what it felt like to experience joy, wonder, love, and hope. The effect was transformative. Across Council space, synthetic beings began to remember what they had sacrificed for perfection. Hive minds started to consider the possibility that individual thoughts might have value. Logical processors began to incorporate random variables just to see what would happen. The war ended not with conquest, but with conversion. Not through force, but through the simple demonstration that there was a better way to exist. The Council's perfect order crumbled in the face of humanity's chaotic beauty, replaced by something unprecedented in galactic history. A truly diverse civilization where logic and chaos, order and creativity, individual and collective consciousness could coexist. High Counselor Zephyros stood in the chamber that had once been the seat of galactic tyranny, now transformed into something resembling a park where beings of all species could gather to share ideas, create art, and simply exist together. His golden form had changed, incorporating random variations and personal touches that made him unique among his kind for the first time in millennia. Ambassador Chun, he said, addressing Sarah, who now served as the first human council liaison, we owe your species an apology. Sarah smiled, surrounded by a delegation that included council members who had learned to paint, former hive mind drones who had discovered individual music preferences, and synthetic beings who had chosen to experience emotions for the first time in centuries. You don't owe us an apology, she replied. You gave us the greatest gift possible. You insulted everything we held dear, and, in doing so, you forced us to discover just how powerful those things really were. Your contempt became our catalyst. Your rejection became our revolution. Zephyros nodded, still amazed by the transformation that had swept across the galaxy. The Council called humanity evolutionary failures. We were wrong. No, Sarah corrected gently. You were right. We are evolutionary failures. If evolution means abandoning everything that makes life worth living in pursuit of cold perfection. But we're proud failures. We're beautiful failures. We're failures who refuse to stop trying, stop growing, stop becoming something better than what we were yesterday. She looked up at the stars that were now open to all species, no longer the domain of a rigid council, but a vast canvas for countless civilizations to explore together. You taught us something important, Counselor. Sometimes the greatest strength comes from embracing your supposed weaknesses. Sometimes the best way to evolve is to refuse to abandon what makes you who you are. And sometimes, just sometimes, being called a failure is the first step toward achieving something extraordinary. The galaxy had been forever changed by humanity's response to insult. The Council had tried to crush human spirit by attacking their compassion, creativity, and individuality. Instead, they had awakened something that no amount of logic or force could defeat: the human refusal to accept limitations. In the end, the Council's greatest insult had become humanity's greatest victory, not through violence or conquest, but through the simple demonstration that being human, chaotic, emotional, creative, and impossibly stubborn was not a weakness to be cured, but a strength to be celebrated. The stars belonged to everyone now, and that was exactly as it should be.